So I'll let you start.
Sounds great. I'm just gonna let Cole in here.
There we go.
Doesn't look like Cole. That's Chrissy Engel. She just has the name of Cole Tate on here. I know her, so.
What a memento.
We get that lots because we all, that's in our office too. We have one license and we all use it. So it depends on the day who we are. Sometimes we're not who we say we are.
Well, I keep telling it to remember my name. And it's like, what? No. Oh, whatever.
So we're going to get started. So as we gather here today, I just wanted to acknowledge that we are on Treaty 6 territory and the homeland of the Métis. We pay our respects to the First Nations and Métis ancestors of this place, and we reaffirm our relationships with one another. So my name is Jessica Roberson, and I'm with the Indigenous Business Development Services Program in partnership with Sage Hill Community Futures. And we have Trevor King here today with Prairie Paget. He has been one of our guests several times, as he is very knowledgeable in the area of CRA and business expenses and GST and PST, and that is the webinar that we are hosting today. So that being said, I'm just going to let Jenny introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Jenny Glessman and I work with the Sage Hill Community Futures office. We hold the contract for the Indigenous Business Development Services. So this is we've been offering the series of workshops every 2 weeks. We have a different one. Next one that we're having is Google Knowledge page, right, Jessica?
Yes,
and
so
that
it's
is
the Google landing page, and we have Zap Creative walking us through that.
And that one's on October 12th. So with that said, we'll maybe we have 2 today and we've got maybe some more joining us. We'll just get them quickly to introduce themselves so that Trevor gets a feel for who's here and what business you have. So we'll start with, is it Chrissy?
Hi, I'm Chrissy Engel, and I'm a sole proprietor for a coaching company.
Great. Thanks for joining us. And Terry.
Hi, Terry Brome here. I'm a business development officer at Community Futures New Sask out here in Tisdale. And I saw this series and it looked really good. So I'm actually just trying to get a little bit of knowledge and make sure that we kind of are on track with the material that you're providing. Hi.
Great. Thanks for joining us. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Trevor and he's going to teach us all about the wonders of GST and PST.
Thank you, Jenny. So my name is Trevor King. I'm one of the managing partners with Prairie Paget Tax and Accounting Limited, situated in beautiful Rostern, Saskatchewan. Today, we're going to go through the basics of GST, PST, and how the input tax credit system works, and how that affects your business, and how you can set it up, what your reporting requirements are. This presentation typically runs long, as do most of my presentations, because I plan them for about 45 minutes, but they're always about an hour and 5, an hour and 10. So we'll try and stay on track. If you have any questions at all, just ask them while we're going along. That way we can settle it right then. Or if you have a specific question, if you have a business situation you're not sure of that you don't want to discuss on a recording, you can, my contact information will be here. You send me an email, we can set up a call and I can go through it with you. Okay, so with that, I need to.
I should have made, I think you're co-host, so you should be able to share your screen, Trevor.
Yep. Just got to pick the right one here. All right. Let's go with this. Can everyone see this now?
Yes. Trevor, your volume is maybe a smidge low.
Gotcha. I'm not sure how to turn my mic volume up.
Okay. You're audible. We can hear you. I just thought if you could, but that's fine.
I'll turn my headset forward a little bit. Is that better, Jessica?
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So like I said, my name is Trevor King. I'm one of the partners in Prairie Paget Tax and Accounting in Rostern. This is my GST and PST presentation. We're going to go through the basics of GST, input tax credits, collecting and remitting GST, along with the changes that came into effect end of July of this year for GST regarding digital content and drop shipments. Basically, I don't think that would apply to any of the businesses here today, but we'll go through them just so you have a well-rounded knowledge of what we're going to do. PST, what purchase exemption is, and then as well as remittance and filing dates for the PST system. So GST is charged on all taxable sales of goods and services. There is a minimum threshold before you have to start charging and remitting GST. You exceed $30,000 over 4 consecutive quarters, or you've done more than $30,000 in a single quarter. So basically, if you have an income of more than $30,000 in a 3-month period, you have to register for a GST number with Revenue Canada. You can voluntarily register for GST number to begin taking advantage of what's called the input tax credit, and we'll go through that a little bit later. Also, just for those of you that want to do business with the Government of Canada, you will be required to have a GST number. Also, if you're applying for a ETIN number, if you're working into the US, you need a GST number for your business in order to get an ETIN number. Right, so that's just one of the other reasons you would have a GST number. So input tax credit. Anytime you make a purchase for your business that's considered an expense. Now, we went through all the expenses 2 weeks ago. It was the general explanation is any money that you have to expend in order to develop, expand, promote your business, or to complete the work of your business. If you're charged GST, you can claim it back as an input tax credit. Basically, just hang on a second. I'm running in the background there. Basically, if you have to pay GST on a piece of equipment, say, for instance, I'm going to pick on Chrissy because she's the only business owner here. Say she has to buy a laptop. Laptop's $2,000. GST on that would be $100. So if she's GST registrant, she claims back the $100 against GST that she's collected through the course of her business, or if she's an exempt business, typically those are related to agriculture, you just claim the tax credit back, right? So that's another reason you would want to file your GST. Now, if you're going to apply for a GST number, you figure, okay, I'm setting up my business. I'm projected to make X number of dollars this year, but I haven't claimed the $30,000 in a quarter yet. Like I haven't met the threshold, but you're anticipating that you will. Also, if you're going to spend a lot of money buying capital equipment, you're going to want to apply for a GST number because you can claim all of that GST money back, right? Rather than you can't apply for a GST number now, so for October the 1st, and then try and claim an input tax credit from January, February. It's just not how the system works. It only works after you've gotten registered for the GST number.
What happens if you don't end up making that threshold and now you filed for a GST number and now that following year you haven't earned those dollars? If you
were to voluntarily
like if you
file,
projected that you were going to, and so you get the number, you get set up, but then in the end you don't end up.
As soon as you get a GST number and you start charging GST, you're required to continue charging and remitting GST. You can close your GST account at the end of the year. You apply to CRA and say, you know what, my business revenue is less than projected. This is our situation, but that's on a case-by-case basis where you shut down the GST number. Yeah, it's kind of, once you apply for it and you get it, you have to charge that 5% and track everything and remit it to the government.
Okay.
It's kind of an all or nothing. You can't pick and choose with GST,
Okay.
right? Anyone have any questions on input tax credits?
So just to double check, no matter if you know you're not going to make the threshold and you apply for GST to take advantage of the tax credit, you have to start charging and remitting on the business that you do, even if it's under the threshold?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can't claim the tax credit back and not charge and remit the GST. You can't do half of it. It's an all or nothing sort of deal.
Perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Right. So say you're working in an exempt agriculture field. For an exemptions, I'm going to pick on interliners. Now, interliners are people that haul agricultural equipment from one place to another. Now, they don't charge GST on their services because it's agriculture related, but they do pay GST. They pay GST on fuel, they pay GST on parts and repairs, and they can claim all of that GST money back. Right? That's an example of a business that would benefit from claiming a GST tax credit. Now you have 4 years to claim your GST from the initial due date of the remittance period. So say your GST was due December 31st of 2009. You have until 2013 to claim it. Or I could use 2019 and 2023. That'd be a little more relevant. So 4 years to claim the tax credit, but you do need the number to start the remittance period, right? You can't go back 4 years from when you got your GST number. Now, when you're issuing sales invoice, and I can make this slides available. There are certain things that once you have a GST and PST number, you have to add that number to your invoices. You also add your business number and a description of the goods or services. Now, for anyone who's a new company starting out, you haven't quite got your invoicing system down, I highly recommend you always include a description of the goods or services you provided and terms of payment, right? Whether you're on a 30-day term payment, 10-day term, or due upon receipt. Just so it's very clear from the start with the companies you're working for, especially if you're a small sole proprietor and you're working for a larger corporation. Like you send them an invoice and it doesn't have terms of payment on it, they're going to assume that it's net 30 days. So they're going to wait until day 29 to issue your check to pay you. That gets into cash management and why they do that. Basically, it's just to maximize the value of the cash they have, right? So they'll wait to pay you as long as possible. That's how most businesses will operate that way. Some old school businesses won't. As soon as they get a bill, they'll pay it, whether it has terms applied or not. Right. Okay. Do you have any questions regarding sales invoices?
I do.
Yep.
Trevor, I was wondering, is there any legal ramifications as to why you should put a date on there, like the terms? So let's say you put net due 30 days, but you don't get paid, but it clearly indicates on your invoice that you wanted to be paid within that time frame. So then does it protect you to have terms, payment terms?
It protects you in the sense that if your payment terms are due 30 days, all invoices are subject to 2% monthly charge on overdue invoices. That gives you a place to stand to charge interest on your bill.
Okay, right.
And just keep sending the invoice. Now, this is where you get into, you have an overdue invoice that's several months overdue. This is where you get into, like we talked about, writing off bad debt. Right. Like there's no odds of collecting, there's no odds of collecting. And oftentimes, depending on the value of your invoice, is it worth it to go through collections to try and get your money?
Right. So then you just end up claiming it. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, you basically end up taking it as a loss. Sometimes, and this is especially with new entrepreneurs starting out, you're working with a client, you don't know You haven't built a business relationship. There's nothing wrong in asking for a deposit.
Mhm,
That way you're at least guaranteed to get paid partially.
mhm,
And invoice monthly. Don't wait till the end of a project, right? Especially if it's a
Mhm.
long, like 6 or 8 month project, and then you wait right till the end and send them an invoice. Just invoice every month
mhm.
with your terms, right? It just sets out a clear expectation for you, and it sets out a clear expectation for your client,
Right.
whoever you're working for, right?
Yeah.
And having payment terms does give you more of a legal standing if you got into a legal fight over an invoice. But I mean, you got to weigh the cost and benefits of that as well, right? Any other questions regarding invoicing, what you would require? No? Okay. Yeah, this moves along a lot faster when there's only one other business in the group here. All right, zero rated supplies. You ever notice that you don't pay a lot of tax on grocery items? You fall into the category that's exempt, right? So your basic groceries, those are exempt supplies. Agricultural products, they have dried tobacco leaves here. That means unprocessed tobacco. Processed tobacco is taxed very heavily. Farm livestock, prescription drugs, medical devices, exports. So if you're exporting out of Canada, GST is not applied. And same with shipping. If you're shipping out of Canada, GST is not applied. Now, GST is applied if you use Canada Post to ship out of country. So if you provide or use these products, they will be zero rated. That's why a lot of my farm clients, they all have GST numbers, right? They don't charge GST on anything, but they claim GST back on whatever they had for an expense, right? So their fuel, if they're buying not from a bulk fuel dealer, right? Most bulk fuel dealers don't charge them the GST. Parts, services, those kind of things that they pay for, they're just claiming back the GST, and that's a really good example of why you would have a GST number when you wouldn't charge GST. And this is a long list of exempt supplies. Most medical things you don't pay GST on. You don't pay GST on post-secondary school. You don't pay GST when you borrow money from a bank. There's a long list. I'm not going to go through all of them because everyone can read. And we can make, do you guys have any questions about what qualifies in it as an exempt supply? No. Yeah, it's very, all of these are very much available on the CRA website. They update their list of what they considered exempt supplies. It's always there. Sometimes it hasn't been updated in a while, but it's definitely a way to check if you're not sure if something is exempt or not. Now, collecting and remitting. So when you charge and collect GST, it's not your money, right? You issue an invoice for $1,000, $50 of that GST is the government's money. You're just holding on to it for them, right? And I'll find a lot of, especially newer entrepreneurs, where they get set up and they're like, okay, this year I'm going to charge GST and PST. Great. Well, invoices keep rolling in, but the expenses keep growing. The problem they get into is come to the end of the year, they've spent all the GST and PST money, right? So highly recommend you have a separate account for your GST and PST and you just transfer it over. It's not a huge amount. I mean, we're talking 11% of an invoice if you're charging GST and PST. Just take that and tuck it away. So you're the registrant, you're responsible for collecting and remitting the money to Revenue Canada. GST collected minus your input tax credit equals your total amount remitted. So if you collected $5,000 in GST and you had $4,000 in input tax credits, you owe the government $1,000 at the end of the year, or the end of your remitting period, whatever that may be. Okay. So, and that is really, that's something that is often a difficult concept, because you're sending the invoice out for X amount of dollars and you're getting paid that much, but not all of that money belongs to you. The government wants their portion. Right? Does anyone have any questions about collecting and remitting the GST? No?
Is there a way to automate that with CRA?
Automate like the remittance of GST?
Yeah, like, is there like a monthly system that you can?
You can, okay, so you can set your remittance dates, and it's based on revenue, what the minimum setting is. You'll be either annual, quarterly, or monthly remittance. And then when the government comes, or when your remittance date comes due, you still have to manually go in and fill out the remittance forms. You can do it online. The e-file system is great. It's a 4-digit code along with your business number. Provided you have your what you've collected and what you're claiming, provided you have whatever system you're using to keep track, whether you're using Excel, paper ledger, any of the automated accounting systems, as long as you have your remittance values, you can remit it once a month if you're worried about getting to the end of the year and having a huge tax bill.
Right.
Yeah. But you have to ask for that when you apply for your GST number, that you want to be a monthly remitter.
Okay.
Otherwise, your 4-digit code won't let you.
Okay.
Right. So, any other questions about collecting and remitting GST? No? Okay. Right. So you do not include revenue from supplies made outside Canada, 0 rated exports, 0 rated supplies, exempt supplies, taxable sales of capital, property, and goodwill. Now, goodwill is something that is used a lot, especially in business valuation. And they say, well, the business is worth, $150,000, but it has, another $50,000 of goodwill. Now, if I asked you guys, could you tell me what goodwill is? Not the store in the US either. No, I hear crickets. Okay, so goodwill is like, say you were to buy a business, and it's an established business in a small community. It's well liked by everyone there. It's got a great reputation. Goodwill is basically buying the intangible name, right? You're buying the history of the business. You're buying the established client base, that it's a recognized establishment, right? So you can say, well, the business is worth, you made X number of dollars last year, or, you can use the valuation where you go by what the assets would sell for. And then goodwill is basically what you're paying for the name, right? So goodwill is not taxable in that sense. Any other questions on what you don't include revenue from with regards to GST? No? Okay. Now here, Jessica, this is where we get into assigned and optional reporting periods. So if you're making more than 1.5 million a year, you got to remit quarterly. And if you're doing more than $6 million a year, you have to do it monthly. But you can select an optional monthly reporting period if you want.
I know we find lots of people or business owners, when they sign up the first time, they always come back yearly. We always strongly suggest that maybe they change it to quarterly, just to help with the cash flow part of it.
Yeah,
because
what you end up with is especially when you're new in a business, you have a lot of money going out the door, and unless you're keeping track, and it's really hard to keep stuff separate. Especially your sole proprietorship, it's one bank account. you know, oh, I can buy this new piece of equipment, or I can expand, or I can hire this subcontractor or this employee. And then all of a sudden you get to the end of the year, and yeah, you don't have a big income tax bill because you spent a lot of your profits, but you end up having a significant GST bill. And that's where either, yeah, remit quarterly or have a separate account. That's what we just put it away in a separate account, or have a minimum threshold that you keep in your business account. Any way you do it, whatever, you got to find something that works for you, right? Whether it's like, oh, you know, I never remember to remit it monthly, or I never remember to remit it quarterly, but I can just take 11% of whatever's coming in. Or if it's just GST, I can take 5% of whatever's coming in and tuck it away, right? So yeah, does anyone have any questions about assigned and optional reporting periods? No, it's pretty straightforward. And if you miss a reporting period, they'll send you a friendly reminder letter, and so on and so forth. Now, this is the best part. Remitting GST is really easy. Their net file system works great. You need your 4-digit access code, and you need your business number. You need to know how much GST you collected, what you're claiming for input tax credits. Put all your numbers in, away you go, done. They print you out a handy little voucher. You can pay it online through your online banking, or they'll print you out a QR code that you can actually take to any Canada Post office and pay there. Yeah, it's very handy. Jenny, you look surprised.
Is that something new? I've never known that was an option to tell a client.
I just did it for a client day before yesterday.
Oh, cool. So it's just these wonderful barcodes.
Yeah, it prints it. I finished their GST for 2 years, and I sent them a QR code. I said, next time you swing by Canada Post office and pay your GST. Works great.
Well, especially for some remote ones, now there's not a bank or something in their area. And then if they're not doing online, it's another option. Oh, cool. Okay, learned something new today.
Yeah, that's one of the new things I've noticed. Typically, most of my clients have just paid their GST through their online banking system, but yeah, it's one of the things that's very useful about it. So when your reporting period ends, you have until the 15th of the next month, typically, right? So you have a month from when it ends until it's due. The only exception is on an annual December 31st. And this is where people get confused, because they think, okay, December 31st is my year end, right? 1st of February, I got to have my GST done. No, actually, you got to pay it by the 30th of April, but you got to file by the 15th of June, which makes no sense, right? Because how am I supposed to pay what I have no idea what I owe, right? So this is where you get into problems where people are, they haven't filed their GST and they haven't paid it because they don't know how much to pay because they're not filing it until the 15th of June. I recommend as soon as your reporting period ends and your books are closed, file your GST. You don't have to pay it until the 30th of April, but at least then you know, right? So you got 3 months to figure it out. Whether you've made an error throughout the year and you haven't saved the money, you got 3 months to come up with it, right? If you do have an annual remittance period that's other than a calendar year, you have 3 months after your year end to file your GST. I like the monthly system or the quarterly system. It's easier on cash flow and it's just easier for the clients. Guys have any questions on how to remit GST to Revenue Canada? No, it's pretty. The government is very efficient at taking your money. They're really good at it. So, and that system actually works really well. It's very user friendly. They have a GST helpline. I've used them before. They've had an incorrect code and they're able to help me out, no problem. Now, what do you do if you get to the end of the year and you don't have any money? there's a saying about a creek and no paddle, because that's where you are. What you do is you make arrangements with Revenue Canada immediately. Like if you find out it's February the 10th, I owe X amount of dollars in GST, there's no way I'm going to come up with that money in time, make arrangements with them. They are very understanding, especially with small business owners, right? They can set you up on a schedule, and then in the future, set a tax account. Put your GST and PST into that account, and you can use the GST credit as a small savings system, right? Because if you're charging GST, odds are you're collecting income tax credits. So you'll get to the end of the year and maybe you get to keep $500 or $600 of that GST because you're claiming an input tax credit on it. Use it as a small savings system. Use it to pay your income tax. Use it to whatever your business needs extra money for. Leave it in there as a cushion.
I actually have a story with that one. My son is a farmer and he shows cattle for people on the side. So he had a lot of contract. He collects a lot of GST. So I made him set up that account, a separate account. And so he always was, anything that he collected GST, he put it in there. And then when we figured it out at the end of every quarter or at the end of the year, he always had this nice little cushion in there, because by the time he took his input credits off from all his farm stuff, he always had this nice little savings pot started. And I started him doing that when he was 17, and he's been doing it ever since. And once you get started, it works really well.
Yeah, as long as the thing is, the only thing is you can't automate it, right?
No.
Because the amounts vary. So you have to
Yes.
remember, all right, so I deposit this check or I get this payment, this much has to go into my GST account.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, if you get to the end of the year and you can't pay your GST, make arrangements with Revenue Canada immediately. Pay what you can. That'll decrease the odds that you owe penalty, and it'll just make your life easier. And ensure you use a tax account for the next year, because obviously either your business is so cash intense that you're spending a lot more because you're in a growth phase, or you're expanding, or you're just starting out. You need to set that money aside, because again, it's not yours. You're just holding on to it for them. Okay. You guys have any questions about GST at all? I just have, the next slide is the new changes to the GST program. No, nothing about GST so far. Okay. So Jessica actually sent me an email about this. She said, well, how are the new changes going to affect us? And basically, so we had our global pandemic, and it really put a strain on all of our local businesses. And then the government passed this new law. So the rules would have taken effect July 1st, 2021. And really, what they're after, I added in, these are the bullet points direct from CRA, but I added in the stuff in brackets as to what they're after here. So cross-border digital products and services, those are your streaming services, Netflix, Crave, Disney+. Goods shipped through Canadian fulfillment warehouses. So there's an Amazon warehouse in Vancouver, I believe. And I don't know, I know there's another one in Canada somewhere, but I couldn't tell you where it is off the top of my head. And then short-term accommodation, there's an Airbnb, VRBO for all those snowbirds that couldn't go south last year. And they went to Vancouver Island. The government wants their piece of that. So I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars that'll add up to, but it's just more GST. So if you are providing cross-border digital products into Canada from outside Canada, yes, you are now required to charge or remit GST. I'm sure everyone who has Netflix noticed that they sent you a kind little email and they're adding 5% on. Yeah, I can see Jenny and Jessica both noticed that their bill went up. That's just how it is. And part of doing business in Canada, you got to pay your 5%. So does anyone have any questions regarding the new changes to the GST program? No? we're all upset we got to pay 5% more for Netflix. Yeah, I know, it's terrible, but it is what it is. You could just not have streaming service and go back to regular TV.
Still cheaper.
Still cheaper, yeah. So that's the end of GST. We get on to PST, which is its own little monster, I guess. Can be. So no questions on GST. Everyone clearly understands what your obligations are. Whether you're under the threshold, you're not required to collect or remit GST. If you voluntarily apply for a GST number, you are then required to collect and remit GST for taxable goods and services provided in Canada. Okay. Right on. Just cruising right along. All right, PST and the Saskatchewan government. So any taxable good or service in Saskatchewan, apply 6% PST to that. You have to apply for a Saskatchewan PST number, and you're either issued a vendor number or a registered consumer number, and we'll go ahead and get into what the difference is or those. You apply using SETS, which is the Saskatchewan e-tax services. I will say this, it is not as user-friendly as the federal. See, Jenny's shaking her head already. SETS is a little cumbersome. It's not as smooth as the federal government, but I don't think the Saskatchewan government quite had the federal resources to put this together. So they're doing the best with what they can. They do have a really good helpline though. They are very helpful. They helped me when I had some questions about whether I needed to charge PST. And in fact, I didn't with something I was doing because I was considered an intermediary for that sense.
They're really good. I'll talk to that too. They are very good. If you're not sure if you need to charge, you just phone there and they will go through the bulletin. They'll give you the bulletin. They'll tell you, you can get them to email you so you can have a copy for your records as well. So they are very good at that.
And there are hundreds of different bulletins as to what products need PST there. So for us to go through all of them, we'd be here for 2 weeks going through them. So, but they are very helpful, and I highly recommend if you do have to sign up for PST, that you contact them. They'll send you all the relevant information, and it's all up to date, right? Because this stuff changes. What tax is applied or not applied can change with the sitting of government. So by all means, consult them. Make sure you get up to date information. So. The threshold's a little lower for PST. It's only $10,000. And if you purchase taxable goods from a supplier for use within Saskatchewan, you have to self-assess and pay the PST directly to the revenue division of the Saskatchewan government. So what that means was, remember how everything used to always be cheaper in Alberta because you could buy it without paying PST? You actually have to remit that 6% back to the province. You have to do what's called self-assessment and pay your 6% to the government. So if you go out of province to buy equipment, it applies to even buying software. You have to self-assess that 6% and remit it to the government. This is something that was foreign to me before I got into what I'm doing. You guys have any questions about this little caveat regarding PST and self-assessment?
Trevor, was this something that was similar in terms of, I think a few years ago, there was something in terms of with wine and people were going for Saskatchewan?
Is that a liquor consumption tax?
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was PST. Okay, never mind. It's separate.
But it's kind of the same sort of theory though, what you're going down there. You do have to self-assess the PST and remit it to the revenue division.
Okay. Now, what about in terms of if you're bringing in product, let's say from China, to resell it? How does that play in? Is that completely different?
That would mean, no, if you're bringing it in for resale,
yes,
you only pay the PST once on stuff, right? So if you're bringing it in to sell it, then
Then you pay the
charge PST on the sale of your product, right? GST and PST, and
Mhm.
then you remit that portion to the government.
Okay. So it doesn't matter that you didn't pay that to bring it here.
No, so sorry, I should clarify. If say for instance, tomorrow I drive to Calgary and I buy a vehicle for my business, come home, register the vehicle under the business. When you go to register it, they're going to charge you 6% PST.
Okay.
Same as if I bought, like this applies to supplies for the business. If I bought a new photocopier out of Edmonton or anything regarding that,
Okay.
I would have to self-declare the 6% PST.
Okay.
So
Trevor, when you have a business, do businesses just normally register for a PST number, or what if they are unsure they're going to make $10,000 in sales? I wondered, we were thinking that the PST number application might be more mandatory.
oftentimes when you register a business with ISC, they'll ask you if you want to register with SETS for
There's
PST
an option
number.
there, yep.
Yeah. And then you're automatically enrolled in it.
Okay, but a person could actually not do that and not register for PST if they're actually under the 10,000?
Yes, if you're under the 10,000.
And would that be on a yearly basis or?
Yes, that's an annual. It's an annual amount.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you'd be. I think it's a small suppliers exemption. So if you're under 10,000, then you don't need to register for PST number.
Thank you.
That being said, now there is a caveat to that. You also are unable to buy items PST exempt, right? So if you're, say, I'll use Jessica's for example. Say she got some of her product from China, and she buys the rest of her product from Moose Jaw to resell. You're going to end up paying 6% PST for your product because you don't have a PST number to get you an exemption.
So that's like my husband and I, we actually own a lumber yard. So we have our number so that it allows us to buy everything we purchase for the store is PST exempt. And then, because do they not say that PST is like a consumer tax? Like you only pay it once and it's the end purchaser that pays the GST or pays the PST, sorry. Does that make any sense?
That is correct.
Yeah.
So Jenny, you would function like an intermediary. Right, you buy from the lumber producers and then resell to the eventual consumer, and they're the ones that pay the PST.
And it's just like we also have contractors, like we have a lot of home, like guys that do construction work, like, and so they buy their lumber products from us. So we sell to them PST exempt. We have to have their numbers on file, and then when they sell to their customer pays the PST. So PST is only paid once. It's kind of the trick. How I got it through my head for the lumber yard. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that is very much the analogy that PST is paid once at the end. It's not like GST where you pay and claim. You go back and forth, right? Yeah, so you only got to pay the Saskatchewan government once. But do you guys have any other questions regarding registering for PST? Oh.
Well, so sorry. So then, if you bought stuff in China and then you bought stuff in Moose Jaw, the difference would be if you didn't have a PST number.
You're going to end up paying 6%. You're going to have to end up paying the PST to the supplier in Moose Jaw, right? Because they can't sell it to you PST exempt unless you have a PST number, right? Because they're required, like Jenny does with their lumber yard, they're required to keep the PST number on file and attach it to the invoices.
Right. Gotcha. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. How often and when to file? Now, this is amount of tax collected. So if you're collecting more than $4,800 in PST a year, you have to file quarterly. If you collect more than 12 grand in PST a year, you got to file monthly. You can have the option, I believe you can have the option to file monthly or quarterly with PST as well. I thought that was the way Seth had it set up.
So those dollar amounts are how much sorry, that's not your income is over 12,000 per year. That's the amount of PST that you collected.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you're doing more than 200 grand a year in taxable sales, you got to remit monthly for round number sake. Okay. And filing is the same. File it with sets online, make a payment through your bank. I don't believe that the Saskatchewan government is set up with the payment through the post office. I believe that's just for federal payments.
And make sure you're on time.
Yes. Yes. They do not like you to be late.
Even if you use your bank and it tells you it takes 2 or 3 business days for it to go through. So if it's due on the, what is it, the 20th? I should know this. Due on the 20th and you put it through your bank on the 20th and they haven't received it, you'll get charged interest.
Yeah, they're sets is actually a little more intense than the federal government when it comes to PST. They don't mess around, those guys. But I mean, you're collecting money that's not really yours, right? You have to look at it that way, right? Like I issued a $100 invoice or $111 invoice. 5 of those dollars belongs to the federal government and 6 of them belong to the province of Saskatchewan. It's just not your money. Don't even count it as yours. Put it away in a separate account. Okay. Now, what is a nil return? I get this question with some of my clients because they operate a seasonal business. You know, we're only open in the summer. So what do I do in the wintertime? You just file a nil return. You have no tax to report. You still have to file it to avoid a penalty, and returns are due the 20th of the month following the end of the reporting period. Just like Jenny had reminded us that she does the remittance for the lumberyard on the 18th because it takes 2 days to process. A nil return, you go into your online account, fill it out, done. You don't have any taxable income to report for that period. Or say you have a really slow month and you don't sell anything for 3 months. It's a nil return, right? You still have to file it. It's part of the requirements of being a PST registrant, but you won't have to pay any money because you wouldn't have collected any tax. Any questions? Pretty straightforward. Right on. Why is there no input credit for PST? This is a question I get a lot. Well, why can't I claim that money back? You can claim an exemption for PST for taxable goods or services that you purchase and intend to resell, such as lumber or any other items you're buying and reselling. You give them your PST number. For instance, I have a client that makes apparel, custom t-shirts and stuff. And they buy all of their t-shirts PST exempt because the PST is paid by the final consumer, right? And if you're buying PST exempt, you'll be required to provide them with a PST number. Just how the system works, right? Because the government wants to keep track and make sure that people aren't saying, "Oh, I have a PST number," and they're buying it for personal use, just saving themselves 6%.
So when you go, let's say, to Home Depot, they have the capability of putting in your PST number?
You should be able to if you're registered with them.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious on how easy that is for businesses.
I don't use a lot of Home Depot.
I don't. I know for us, we just have to have their PST number on file. We have in our computer system, we have a place where we put everybody's PST numbers, and then we're able to set their account at, exempt.
Okay.
If they come in to do something for personal, then they tell us and we click it, and then we're able to charge the PST. I know that's how we operate, but I don't know how the big ones operate.
Yeah, I was just
Maybe
curious.
that's where the contractors' desks are, right?
Yeah.
There's places like Home Depot and Lowe's have that contractor's entrance.
Mhm.
Yep.
Maybe you have to be registered with them.
I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah, I was just thinking if you're an artisan or something and you're going to the dollar store or, you know, Michael's or something, do they have that available
can-
to you?
But can you not, Trevor, claim, like I know I've done it before where we've bought something and PST was charged on it. It just, they didn't take our number, but I can claim that back on my return at the end, can I not?
You can, yes, if you're buying supplies for resale, like Jessica, for example, with the dollar store. I know the dollar store doesn't take PST numbers
Yeah.
because again, my apparel client also makes custom cups and stuff.
Okay.
So she keeps track of it throughout the year. At the end of the year, I go through, okay, this is your, there is a form. I remember we had this last time we went through the webinar. There is a form that you fill out through the PST system to claim it. I mean, it's easier. You can just give them your PST number, then that way it's less work for you and less headaches for me, but whatever you got to do, either they take it or you keep track of it and then claim it on your PST.
Like I know
Right.
Costco does, because we actually buy stuff sometimes from Costco and we have a permit and they have our number and we actually, it has to be run through separately, but we can buy PST exempt through Costco.
Yeah, and Costco asks you when you set up your business account,
Yep.
if they say, are you buying stuff for resale?
Yep.
Because they'll, again, leave the PST off.
Yep.
Okay, you guys have any questions about inputs for PST? No. And there's a whole list of stuff. What's exempt? Training, couriers, basic groceries, agricultural, healthcare, daycare. Your tattoos are PST exempt. I have no idea how they ended up in there, but that's just what the government decided. And this is by no means an exhaustive list of stuff that's exempt from PST.
But you have to watch, I know one that we always run into is that where you've got spas and beauty salons, the service is, but if they're selling any products, like if they're selling shampoos or conditioners or hairbrushes, anything,
yeah.
then they got to charge. We help so many clients with that part.
Yeah, because they won't charge PST on the actual service, but it is the retail portion. And lots of times with those clients, I recommend that you have two separate systems, right? These are for services, and it's PST exempt. I mean, there's lots of programs that will help with that.
Yeah.
Do you know if coaching is considered PST exempt?
That would be a consulting service,
Okay.
and I would check the circular for it from the government of Saskatchewan. I would assume that coaching is PST exempt. Depends if you're working within the province or not.
I'll call them. Thank you.
No problem. Now, to charge or not to charge. When do I charge GST and PST? Now, you're selling within Saskatchewan and you're registered for GST and PST. You apply both taxes. You're selling outside Saskatchewan, like say, for example, you're selling products into Alberta. You charge GST only. You're selling outside Canada, zero rated goods. GST and PST does not apply. If your business is based outside Saskatchewan and you sell into Saskatchewan, you're required to register, charge, or remit PST to the Saskatchewan government. Now, we've all bought stuff from out of province, and lots of times they don't charge the PST because it's unlikely that they're registered. But for most big companies, to be correct and within the confines of the law, you're required to charge and remit PST to the government of Saskatchewan if you're selling into Saskatchewan. A fun little caveat that I didn't know either. Guys, have any questions about whether to charge or not to charge GST or PST? No, it's pretty straightforward. And if you're like Netflix and you're selling digital content into Saskatchewan, you got to charge GST. You don't have to charge PST yet, but GST. I'm sure PST is coming. only a matter of time. I mean, a 6% on everyone's Netflix, they have more money than they know what to do with. Right now, and this is direct from CRA, their definitions of who is GST and PST exempt. So under the Indian Act, if you are described as Indian band or a band empowered entity, and you bought goods on reserve, you present your documentation that's required, you're tax exempt. Even if you're buying goods off reserves for use on reserve, and the goods are delivered to reserve, GST and PST exempt. If goods are bought off reserve and are for band management activities, and they're delivered to the reserve, again, they're exempt. But if you bought goods off reserve, use your own vehicle to transport them back, it is GST and PST does apply. This is the GST and PST exemption for First Nations can become very complicated very, very quickly. I highly recommend anyone who is First Nations or treaty as defined by the federal government, that they go through and really understand how GST and PST applies and whether they are exempt or not, because it can become really complicated really quickly. And I mean, if you're GST and PST exempt, right on. That's how those treaty systems work. That's what they're for. So make sure that you're in line with what you're required to do with regards to the federal and provincial government.
So as a vendor or as the business, if they present you with the proper document, there's probably a number that we need to write down and keep track of?
Yes, it's a DIAN number.
Okay.
Also known as a treaty number.
Treaty number, but we need to
So
keep that on file, right? Is that correct?
You write it on the invoice. So
On the invoice?
for example, I'm going to use a car dealership. Say someone who has GST exemption through a treaty number buys a vehicle and it's delivered on reserve, it's GST exempt. That's how the exemption system works.
Okay.
But again, highly recommend before you make any decisions that you consult with either your accountant, tax professional, check the CRA website, right? Because the rules can change without big announcements. I mean, the rules changed for the digital products, and that didn't make a whole bunch of noise. I think everyone just noticed that they got to pay a little more all of a sudden, right?
Yeah.
You guys have any questions about exemptions?
Trevor, I have one. Say I have a client who has a DIAN number and they're importing goods into Canada. They're picking them up at the train depot in Saskatoon. And because they get shipped into Vancouver and then they get picked up in Saskatoon there. The goods aren't being transported to the reserve. They have to go in and pick them up because I guess that's just as far as they're getting shipped.
Okay.
Would they pay PST and GST on those imported goods then, by the look of this?
And what are they importing the goods for?
For resale. They're importing them.
So they wouldn't pay PST on them.
But they would pay GST on them, but not PST until the final sale.
Yeah, so you wouldn't.
Okay.
PST is a final sale tax. Now, whether the vendor is going to charge them GST or not, entirely dependent on the vendor. Probably not.
Okay.
Right. So odds are there'd be GST. They would be buying GST exempt supplies. Right.
Okay.
Because what you're talking about is someone shipping from outside.
Yep, someone shipping actually from a product from out of country, and then it's coming to I guess, Vancouver and then by train or whatever to Saskatoon, and they're picking it up at that inland terminal, so to speak?
Yeah, so I mean, it's because it's being shipped from out of country, there's no GST applied on their invoice.
There isn't.
Right. No, there won't be.
Okay.
If they check their vendor, unless their vendor is also a registered business within Canada, highly unlikely if they're shipping to Vancouver though.
Okay, so PST not likely, and then they're just gonna have to find out regarding their GST.
Well, no, they won't pay GST or PST on that.
Oh, they won't pay either. Okay, thank you.
No, because they're exempt from PST because it's goods for resale, and it's
Yep.
GST exempt because it was bought outside the country. Now, when they sell those goods, depending on whether they qualify as a small supplier or if they're selling them on reserve, again, that can lead to a whole mess of whether they charge GST or not, depending on who they're selling the product to, right?
Yep. Yep, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. So you see how quickly GST and PST can get muddled together.
yeah, because they're not getting charged it potentially. Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, does anyone have any other questions about GST and PST exemption? No, a lot of head shaking. And that's it. 57 minutes and 4 seconds. I'm only 2 minutes over my allotted time, so that's pretty good for me.
That's
Did-
awesome.
So does anybody have any other questions of Trevor? If not at this time, we have been recording, so it will be on our YouTube channel, which you will find on the IBDS's new website. And we put them all on there, and they're there as a free resource to use or to share. So at this time, I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Trevor. This was very
Thank you, Trevor.
informative. As always,
welcome.
you bring the good part of GST and PST out.
Well, it's a lot of people are very uncomfortable with GST and PST because it's something else I got to pay. It's something else I got to pay, and you got to look at it as like, think of it like a little savings account for yourself, especially if it's in an interest-bearing account. So,
That's a good point, and that's a good way to look. A very good way for business owners to look at it.
yeah, because the other way you look at it as it's like it's just something else I got to pay, and that just drags you down.
Yeah.
Well, great. Anyway, thanks everybody. Thanks for
Thank
joining
you.
us today, and we hope to see everybody 2 weeks. We'll be back on about Google Landing. So have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Thank you.